something after this or this week conference. Yeah.
We're going to start.
All right, everyone can start grabbing a seat. There's two panels, like two programs going on right now. One right here will be making space, taking space, inviting and engaging youth to advocate across systems. And next room, currently, there's mental health matters, strategies for youth well-being. So you can pick one of them, and then we'll be starting here shortly. The other one, next room, has already started. So if you want to go for the mental health, you can.
Everyone, please take a seat because we will be starting shortly. Thank you.
Excuse me, everyone. May I have your attention? Excuse me, everyone. Can I have your attention? We are starting our session, so we request you all to be seated.
All right, that's good. Are we live yet? Yeah, we're live.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Should I use that one instead?
I shouldn't have it at least. I think it's supposed to be up here.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. That was like one person. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. So we are here from the School of Social Work at Cal State LA, California State University, Los Angeles, and we will all do personal introductions. Thank you. Let's see, do I need this a little closer? We will all do personal introductions as we do our presentations, but in a nutshell, we're going to talk to you about how you can invite and engage youth to advocate across various systems. So, my name is James Simon. I'm an associate professor at California State University, LA, Cal State LA, and I have been a social worker for a long time. In fact, I like to say that social work chose me because I was an at-risk youth at 16, and I got hired through a summer program working with at-risk youth. So I would help them find jobs, and I'll tell you, it's a good way to forget about your problems when you're dealing with everyone else's problems, right? So I did that and kept working with various at-risk youth throughout Los Angeles County. And eventually I got involved, when I did my master's degree, with families involved in child protective services. So these are families who are investigated for abuse and neglect. And while I was doing that, because I investigated families for many years at CPS in Los Angeles, I saw that several families kept coming back. I would go investigate them, give them services, and then they would come back. And that led me to pursue my doctoral studies to understand, well, why do they keep coming back? I thought I was helping them, right? And it really got me thinking about poverty, which is no surprise is SDG number 1, right? Because it connects to so many of the other SDGs. As part of this presentation, we're going to connect it to SDG 16, which is to end abuse, but also having accountable systems. So let's start off with just understanding the link between poverty and maltreatment. So number 1, poverty is the biggest predictor of maltreatment. And I'll give you the caveat. It does not mean that if you're poor or you live in poverty, you're going to maltreat your kids. But there's a lot of issues that come with poverty that are associated with maltreatment. So they're linked, and we know this, all right? And focusing on data in the United States, 37% of kids will be reported to Child Protective Services by the age of 18. And if you think about how millions of kids are being reported every year, that's a lot of kids, right? And specifically, of those kids that are reported, 74% are for neglect. And that's oftentimes a code word for poverty, another way of saying poverty. And a particular concerning matter is that families of color, so our African-American youth, our Latinx youth, right? They tend to be will live in poverty, and they're reported at higher rates. Now, this is something we can't really ignore, and part of the reason of that is the economic burden of child maltreatment costs our society billions and billions of dollars. So, do we just address poverty? Yes, providing concrete supports is crucial, and there's plenty of research showing that. So, if you provide cash transfers, housing support, tax credit, which means more dollars in for families, that can reduce maltreatment, right? There's also support, and theoretical and empirical support, showing that it helps people engage in other services. So we know that some families need parenting support, help with mental health, help with domestic violence. And oftentimes, providing some of the concrete supports can help us engage them in getting some of these other services that help, right? But there's one important key thing that's missing, which connects us back to the lecture, which is you need to have authentic engagement. Right? You need authentic engagement and transparent systems. Otherwise, just addressing poverty will not be enough. And I'll connect it with the story and then transfer it to my colleagues here. And I want to talk about TDMs and CFTs. And I know that's just abbreviations. That's DCFS language, right? And what that means is that when we had an investigation, so I would investigate a family and say, I'm concerned about this type of abuse or this type of neglect. And what we used to do is we said, all right, come to the office. Let's meet with you. That was a team decision meeting, so this TDM. And notice here, just focus on the image for a second. You see two people talking, one person just listening. That's not authentic engagement. And what used to happen is we would go in there, and I remember very clearly my supervisor saying, all right, this family's coming in. I'm concerned about abuse. You need to detain. And we hadn't even heard the family stories yet. So there was no authentic engagement. A system got involved in their lives and made a decision without hearing the family, right? Now, it took many years, but there was an evolution to what we called child and family teams. And what that became is the same idea of team decision meetings, right? So they had the right idea in mind, but it became longer. It became more authentic engagement, meaning we would listen to what the family had to say, everything they had gone through that led to maybe inappropriate discipline, right? We would have them bring their partners. So they would bring people they trusted, their family members who could help them. The Child Protective Services would invite our partners, meaning Department of Mental Health. So if they needed therapy, they were there to connect, right? Department of Public Social Services. So if they were having trouble paying the rent or they didn't have insurance, they were at the table and we can get them connected right there. There were other agencies involved as well, those who provided therapy as well in the community. And we did this all together, and then we presented the problems to the family, and we empowered them to come up with a solution. And that became the real teaming. Now, if you're interested in any of that, I have the links for you if you'd like. But what we're going to do is transition on to my colleague, Dr. Argelis Ortiz, who's going to talk about how he first listened to his voice for advocacy and then started listening to others.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right. I got a little call and response we could do real quick, and I'll say it a couple times throughout. So please follow with me real quick. So the first part is the personal is political. Are you ready? The personal. A little louder, a little louder. The personal
is political.
Opposite is true. The political is. All right. We're going to say that a few times, okay? The reason I started with this page, or the reason I started with like my intersections, is because just like my colleague said, we have to know what we are all about, right? We have to know where our sort of life intersects. And it starts from who you are as a core, right? Who you were born into. So in my story, I begin with, I am a Guatemex, so that's Guatemalan parents and Mexican parents, American. So they immigrated here in the 70s and 80s, and I was born. And then I am proudly a bilingual Spanish and English speaker. Born and raised in Boyle Heights, which is a neighborhood in East Los Angeles, right? There's a big old stigma attached to that neighborhood, but it was where I grew up at, and it's a beautiful place still. Son of immigrants, husband, and my family is there. Husband and father, two beautiful, strong, smart, and funny daughters. Also a professor, educator, but I have the creative side, I have an artist side, I'm a social worker, a social entrepreneur. That link down there, y'all, gives you sort of podcasts and everything I've been, so please feel free to connect with me that way if you like. This didn't happen overnight, right? This has been many, many years in the making, and a lot of intersections have kind of come in through my life. the next version of it, I'm gonna kind of take you to a couple eras of myself, right? So using my tic-tac-toe era, right? So when I was 12 or 17, I wanted a voice. I wanted a seat at the table. I wanted to make sure people listened to what I needed to do or needed to say. So my focus was school, was my neighborhood, was family, was basketball, and a lot of myself, right? A lot of what I needed during that time was something that I was like wanted people to listen to. Challenges was that being first generation, a lot of trials and tribulations that come with being the first, the eldest, being the firstborn, sort of having a whole different set of cultures and language that you have to navigate while you're in a whole new country and parents that are from different countries, right? In order to create impact, I figured I have to pursue higher education. That's the way to keep going further, right? So from the tic-tac-toe era, I realized, oh man, there's a whole other game out there to play, and it's the checkers era, right? So this is a little bit young adult, right? But my focus is different, right? I still focus on college, I focus on higher education, but now love comes into play. Begin my career, I start focusing on myself, but also my work, right? The challenges continue the same. First generation American trials and tribulations, adulting, right? Now I have to go pay for stuff, right? But I also have minimal career experience. I have all these ideas, I have all these things that I've gone through, but I have minimal career experience. Thereby, people are not listening as much as I wish they would. Another challenge of my time during that time is patience, right? I wanted stuff to happen then, right? There's an injustice, let's fix it. There's something happening, let's make that going. But it took a little while to figure that out. That is a challenge, right? The impact happened is that in most of the spaces, whether it was work or school or my neighborhood, whatever it was, I was the youngest person representing that voice, right? So it was really difficult to get a lot of folks behind me to realize that there was a maltreatment occurring, that there was domestic violence occurring, that there was gun violence, gang violence, because there wasn't a lot of us out there speaking about it. Not that it wasn't happening, that just wasn't a lot of us out there. So our youth voice was kind of trumped by everything else. So it took a little while for me to go from my checkers era to the chess era, right? Same board game, right? But it's a whole different game. Now there's strategy involved. There's people who have to be moved and support, right? There's a whole system behind it, right? My focus is similar still, right? Marriage, family, fatherhood. But now kind of in the mid-career phase, I'm thinking about establishing legacy. I'm thinking about others, right? For the first time, I've thought about myself up until then. Now I'm thinking about who I'm impacting. Now I'm thinking about students of mine. I'm thinking about how I'm impacting the people or clients I work with. Challenges are similar, right? First generation American trials, tribulations. Most of the time, I'm still the first gen to do that thing that everybody else has been doing for many years. Real adulting took place right now. Taxes are real, purchasing things are real, etc. But social justice becomes a really big part of who I am, right? Has gone through my career, my eras, but now I realize, wow, these are whole new challenges. I have to know a whole lot more people. In 2009, y'all, there was an organization in my grad program called California Youth Connection. Up until then, I was the youth voice. In that time, I realized that organization deals with foster youth, but taking their reins in policy and other sort of needs that they have. And what they do is they go talk to state legislators and they go talk to city council folks and mayors and governors and ask about what they need to have. So they created the Bill of Rights, which is the Foster Care Bill of Rights. And in doing so, I learned a lot about if you put the people who are impacted forward, then you'll get more things done if you only put the person like in front of you, like myself, right? So what I was noticing a lot was that I was carrying over that idea of people who have been impacted, people who are at the forefront of, they have the answer, or more than likely they just need some support. So I took a backseat of being the youth voice, and now realizing that I'm a support, now realizing that I am an advocate, I am an ally for folks who are impacted, right? And I've taken that in various spots. So I've taken that in the reentry community, I've taken that in the gang violence community, I've taken that in fatherhood spaces. So in every space that I'm able to do, I realize folks that are impacted are better to talk about what they're going through. And I was once youth, but I'm no longer youth, right? I was once that, but I'm no longer that anymore. So how do I support that? So the impact in the chess era is empowering youth voice in all environments, not just the one that I came from. So even if I didn't have a specific connection, there is another way that I could connect with people that way. So some lessons learned of all the eras continuing together is that, yeah, age matters, but we were all once youth at some point. But at some point, we're going to become the adults, right? At some point, we're going to become the support or the people who are going to be in that role. The focus is, as one grows up, our focus and priorities develop, right? We end up having other priorities that take precedence over career and social justice, et cetera. But it's amazing. That's what it's intended to do. If you notice, the challenges keep being the same, right? First gen, real adulting, social justice just take different shapes, but just don't go away. And last but not least, the impact is that youth voice is in all environments, but now it's up to us to highlight them and bring them up. My colleague, Dr. Victor Manalo, is going to talk about how that voice can actually be highlighted or uplifted in local government. And one last time, the personal is? All right, and the political is? All right.
Thank you, Dr. Ortiz, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Victor Manalo, and it is an honor for me to be here and to be with all of you and everyone who is viewing this all over the world. So thank you to the organizers, and a special shout out to Mr. Mustafa and to Ruby as well. Okay, where am I going here? This arrow? On here. Okay. Well, hold on. There we go. Got it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. So this is me. You see me. Those of you here see me live. But I have taken and made room for myself in these organizations that you see on the slide here. Cal State LA. I've started there in 1999 and continue to teach there. I am the president of the board of directors of the National Association of Social Workers, California chapter, which is the largest chapter in our association. And at the bottom there on the right, the County of Los Angeles. I've been appointed to serve as a commissioner for the Los Angeles County Mental Health Commission. And then above that is the city of Artesia. That's I think that's probably my claim to fame as a social worker, is that I served for nearly 12 years as an elected city council member and the mayor for the city of Artesia, which is in the southeast part of Los Angeles County. And I want to tell you and share with you my experience as an elected official and what I've learned about it, because I was fortunate that when I ran for office and got elected, that I was a full-time professor at Cal State LA. So I knew going into my time as a city council member that I would have to not only learn, but then hopefully teach it to my students. And shout out to my student Leslie, who's here, my graduate student Leslie. So we haven't talked about this yet, Leslie, but this is a preview of what's to come in our class. So, but my message here for all of you is that there is space for all of you in government. And I'm just speaking, of course, from my experience here in the United States. And I know there are people here and also online that are from all over the world. But I can speak from my experience here in the United States, and that local government, which is the government that controls things happening in your own neighborhood and your own community and in your city, there is space for you there. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit about what I've learned. This is kind of what I've found is the perfect ideal of how local government works, in that you have the public, right, which is all of us who live there, whether we vote or not, okay, or are able to vote. We are members of the public. You have your elected officials. You have, and then you have a chief executive, which is usually the person who is hired in this case, a local government, to run the day-to-day operations of that city, right? The elected officials don't run the day-to-day business of the city. The elected officials set the policy and hold the the city accountable and provide a vision, but they don't do the day-to-day operations. They don't hire the trash people. They don't hire the parks and rec people. They don't do any of that stuff. That's what a chief executive does. And then you have a staff. Okay. So this is the best of all possible worlds, is that all four of these segments work together to create policies and provide services to the public. Each of these, the public, the electeds, the chief executive, the staff, they all have a part to play in what services are provided, what programs are provided, what the priorities are of that local government, right? But really what I really learned over almost 12 years of being a city council member is that this is not how things work, okay? Saul Alinsky, the great organizer, said that you have to understand how things are so that you know how to move it to how you want it to be, right? We all look at these things. Many of you who are here, I know, because I was your age at one point in time, a long, long time ago, that we see things very in an idealized version. This is an idealized version of city government. But I know from my almost 12 years that's not how it works. This is how it works. You see what's different? What's missing here? The public. That's how city government works. The public does not get involved in any decisions, very few decisions of the city council, very few. And there are a lot of reasons for that, a lot of reasons. But I think the most important thing that I want to share with you is that your role as a member of the public is vitally important to the running of city government, whether you believe so or not. Because I had a city manager say to me one time, if the public doesn't show up to make any comments or give you any suggestions about what's happening in local government, then they're happy. If you don't show up, you're happy. If you don't show up, you like how things are going. If you don't show up, you are supporting the status quo of your city. Now, I know that's not true. Because if I went around this room right now and I were able to maybe get on a chat and see what everyone's talking about out there in the world, you could come up with tons of things that are happening in your own community and your own neighborhood that need to change. And that there are things about your neighborhood, your city, your community, and you don't accept the status quo and you think something needs to be different. Well, guess what? If you're not engaged, your city council doesn't know it. They don't know what things need to change, right? As a city council member, I used to joke to myself, I would never say this in public, although I'm saying it now. People think that I would drive around the city looking for things to change as a city council member. No, I don't do that. We have staff to do that, right? And luckily my city was small, so I could feasibly do it, but I didn't. I had a full-time job. That's the other misconception. City council is not a full-time job, at least for my city and many cities across the nation. They're not full-time jobs unless you're from a huge city, big city like Los Angeles. So you vitally need to get involved. Now, the way you do this is by increasing your influence, your spheres of influence. So you have to go beyond yourself. You have to work. We are all trying to, that's my timer, so I'm going to stop in a second. We have to increase our influence beyond ourselves as individuals into, we all have relationships with family, friends, and people, and we're starting to break out. You need to increase your influence by connecting with and networking with people that represent institutions, nonprofits, businesses, and also in your community, right? You need to meet and connect and network with all those folks. That's how you build your influence, right? And here, just to show you, because I know when I say the word politics in my class, most of my students shut down because politics is a dirty word for most people. But I'm telling you, do I look dirty? No, I'm still involved in it, right? I don't look dirty. I don't feel dirty, right? But but it can be very dirty. And many of us have seen that. But we cannot expect our governments to provide programs, services, and policies that meet our needs and needs of our communities unless we are engaged and we tell them what we want. That's my message to you. And despite the fact that many of you don't think you don't want to get involved in politics, this is a picture of my MSW students, my master's students from this past semester who met with the young woman who's the second from the left is a staff member for a state assemblywoman here in the state of California. They got to meet with her this semester, right? So we all can take that space and make that space, not just, right? And that's what my colleague, Dr. Willis, is going to talk about. So Dr. Willis, come on up. Thank you.
Okay, this is really exciting. So thank you so much for me, it's been really wonderful already to hear the work of my colleagues and to have gotten to hear a bit of the last two speakers this morning. And I'm imagining all the other wonderful presentations that have occurred the last few days. I'm really inspired by them. And I particularly feel inspired because it feels to me like when I hear all these things that are happening around the world that you're doing in your different communities, I'm part of this bigger web, right? Because there are times in the world when I feel really small and like what I do may not really matter because it's just one little thing. But when we put ourselves together as a collective, that helps me feel much more empowered. So hearing the work that you're all doing and thinking about the work that you're all doing is wonderful to me. So I've entitled my presentation, Applied Research, a Slow Burn Approach to Advocacy. And I say that because I really do see it that way. I see many pathways, and I'll talk about those, but the one I'm going to focus on today is really about research. Let's see. What am I working on here? There we go. Okay, so here's my quick personal and professional introduction. So my name is Dr. Tasha Willis, and I am a faculty member in our School of Social Work. Have the pleasure to work with these wonderful people. And I come from, just briefly, I come from an interracial family, the daughter of a Black man and a white woman in 1970s Chicago, which was a very segregated city and community. And I think as a result of that, I became aware of difference at a very early age. And I started thinking a lot about race and what does it mean to belong and who belongs and who doesn't, and how can you walk in a world when you're betwixt and between, when you're claimed by one or by both groups, but who are you really? So I thought a lot about identity at an early age. And I also had the opportunity to host exchange students and to participate in exchange programs in several different countries where I, again, was walking between worlds. And that really launched me into a career that had me looking at international and intercultural communities and identities and sort of oriented me towards global perspectives. That led me in turn to a degree in my undergraduate degree in international relations, focused on Africa as I was doing my own identity search, and then led me also into the world of educational equity, thinking about disparities and how education is a pathway for many communities forward, and thought a lot about that as I became a social worker and was working in the field of school social work, and thought a lot also about education as a pathway. And it led me to think about research, and researching was what led me into an EDD program, an educational doctorate. So I share that because I think it's important to know where we come from. I think that was mentioned earlier. And I want to point out that my research really is at the intersection of several different fields. I didn't know where my work was going to end up when I was in my undergraduate. I kind of graduated and I thought, what now, right? But it led me to just the path that I'm at, where I am at the intersection of social justice, education, international education, domestic campus climate in higher education, and that's where I really focus. So I want to point out that we all we're all here, perhaps because we have different areas of interest. We have some connection to the social development goals, to the sustainable development goals, and we also may come from very different perspectives on how to achieve our goals. So perhaps you're someone who is ready to go out onto the fields and to protest, right? And to be in the street and to be holding up a sign and to be lobbying in some way, maybe behind closed doors, for example, in lobby days when Dr. Manalo's students were meeting with legislators. Perhaps you're someone who is great at letter writing, or you use social media to amplify your message and the causes that you care deeply about. Perhaps you're someone who's good at negotiation. For me, my pathway has been around research, and research is my advocacy tool. So I want you to think about what pathways suit the issues that you care most about. What will be the most effective tool on your tool belt? Also, which of the different paths towards advocacy fit you and your way of being? And I also heard the speaker, Dr. Smith, earlier speaking about what's your level of risk? Where are you at in your career? Where are you at in your positionality related to the issue at hand? What risks are you able to take so that you can stand up and be an upstander rather than a bystander? And or if you have to provide for people, what does that mean? What compromises might you make? What strategies are going to be the most sustainable for you, also related to your own health and well-being? We see that when we're advocating, we take risks, and we've seen people pay dear costs. So I think about advocacy through research, and I want to invite you. This is really a call. If those of you who have already participated in research, fantastic. If you're undertaking research, fantastic. Perhaps you're someone who is sort of holding up the microscope, so to speak. You are a researcher yourself, and you're participating. You're doing that in communities. But perhaps you are someone who's participated in someone else's research study, which is also vitally important. We need people to get your voices into the mix, whether you're taking a survey anonymously or you're speaking as an interviewee in a focus group or an individual. Perhaps you are already engaged, and I know there's at least one practitioner in the room. I had the chance to meet a colleague, Dr. Michelle, I think, was speaking about her work in the field of youth action research, right? And so youth participatory action research is another pathway where you can be both researcher and a participant making changes in your community. So my personal research has been inspired by my own experiences as a study abroad student. A Black woman in different spaces has influenced the experiences I've had. But also my intersectional identity, my phenotype has impacted my experiences, how I look in comparison to my niece and my sister who also studied abroad. Their experiences in different countries were vastly different. And so that made me think about, well, if I'm having these experiences and they're having different experiences, what about all the other people that I'd like to see studying abroad, because it's such a transformative experience? When we do research that's so connected to our own identities or to our own lived experience, that's often playfully called me-search because it starts from something very personal. And I also would connect it to my professional. As I worked in the field of higher education and worked with students and other Black women who didn't study abroad and may have wanted to, that led me to say, wait a minute, how are we going to get more folks out there? And also, not just how are we going to get them there, how are we going to ensure that they have positive experiences, right? And so briefly, I don't know if you can tell what this image is from so far away. Can anyone tell? This is can you just shout it out? Thank you. It's a toasted marshmallow. If that's not something that's in your diet in your home country, this may be unfamiliar to you, but in the United States, it's very American to have a marshmallow and try to toast it if you go camping, for example. Now, how many of you know how hard it is to toast a marshmallow to this exact tone, right? It's a little tricky. What does it take, do you think? Patience. Yes, it takes patience to get a marshmallow like this because many people will give up and just shove it in the fire. And then what happens? It burns. And if you leave it too far away from the embers or the coals or the fire, it never really gets toasted at all. It's like you don't take a risk, and so it sort of stays bland and blah, right? For me, this is like the ultimate marshmallow. I see another fellow sister who's interested in this level of marshmallow toasting. It, minus the carcinogens, right? You don't have to worry about that. So I say this because this to me is what research really takes. Research takes patience and persistence, and it also takes a good amount of wait, hold on. I had a great idea. Oh, yeah, it's basically time. It's not just the patience, but it's also you need to have time. To me, this ties back to the slow burn approach. If I don't have time to do the research, it may not be as effective. And also, when I do the research, I have to know that it's worth the wait, because over time is how we can make difference, right? That's how I see it. So briefly, I won't go into all of these pieces, but I will say that the experience of doing my dissertation, which related to the experiences of Black women from community colleges studying abroad, right? That was a tiny little chink in the staircase. But if I can see my research in the context of it building to something bigger than itself, I think it's important, right? And I can value that. And I want you to value whatever piece of research that you may decide to undertake, okay? So for example, this first stair step on the right-hand side of this, or on the left-hand side of this visual, is from my dissertation, and it was entitled, "And Still We Rise, Microaggressions and Intersectionality in the Study of Black Women studying abroad. Okay. And this was done, my dissertation was done in 2012. This particular article came out in 2015, and it amplified the voices of 20 participants. That's just a very few number of people, a very small number of people. And yet I think it was important, and it built into something else. The next article that I was connected to, I broadened out, and it brought in other people, including students who themselves became the autoethnographic researchers in the study. So their voices were getting out and amplified into the community, right? And the intention is to get to help influence the way that women experience their study abroad based on staff who might have influence over that. So that's just in one little area of, study abroad. But how many people really do that? Very few, relatively speaking. But on my campus, the second study that I did was actually related to the experiences of Black women at a Hispanic serving institution, which hadn't been done yet. And it's kind of different to be a Black woman on a campus that's predominantly Latinx, for example. And so other folks said, yeah, our students are dropping off. Our Black students are leaving our campus. You did a study on this? And I said, yeah. And I said, but it's just 6 students. And they said, great, gives us food for fodder, right? It gave us something to start with. And then they were able to build into a larger study, which in the third step was really amplifying 26 student voices. This one, somehow the clip art is missing, but there's my little yellow study only had 6 participants, but it was them claiming it. They were owning their narrative. They said, I'm going to put my name on it. It's not even going to be anonymized. I want to own this and be the author, right? And they did. And now, just this semester, just a few weeks ago, I think, the CSU system, California State University, came out with a 23 campus study and report on the state of Black students on our campuses, and also recommendations leading to the distribution of $10 million to try to identify and support Black student success across the CSU system, right? I'm not claiming, no, let me be clear, thank you for that, but I didn't do that. What I'm saying is my little piece may have been a building block for somebody else's bigger study. That's what I want to say. Whatever you do in your local community can be a building block if you collaborate and you have the patience. Because if you notice, my dissertation was in 2012, this article came out in 2015, and this just happened 9 years later in 2024. So you've got to have time. It's a slow burn approach, but it can lead to policy change for equity and to economic resource distribution, which is huge, right? And I think that probably brings me to the end of my time, but I want to just say thank you for carrying your flames. I want to know what those flames are. What is the thing that burns for you? What is the issue that burns for you, and what are you carrying forward? I invite you to become a researcher if you're not already, to reimagine what research is, because to me, research was something out there that I couldn't do, and it turns out that I could, and you can too. Thank you so much, and I look forward to questions. And I think I'm passing it on. Hello, this is the most important part that you've been waiting for. Our alumnus who just graduated a few weeks ago. I'm so excited that you are here to share with us. Ila, thank you for coming forward and sharing with us from the youth perspective.
Hello, everyone. Okay. Hi, Nina. Okay, and then I just press this. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Ila Revillaga. I am a recent MSW graduate, social work. I became an advocate at the age of 8 when I went to my first protest. It was an immigration protest in 2006. I then continued to study and learn about human rights injustices at my local college. I was a high school student when I did that, and I also was lobbying alongside Senator Tony Mendoza in a high school program that he had. He was also from Artesia. So yeah, that's just some of the things that I was able to do. And then at California State University, Los Angeles, I was able to receive my undergraduate and master's degree. Last week I got that. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I decided to choose social work because I was consistently advocating in my communities, specifically for the individuals with disabilities. That's what I primarily was advocating for, the needs that they needed, being integrated into the community and not isolated. And I decided because part of social work is we have this code of ethic and values, and that is social change and social justice that we fight. And so I got into that profession because I wanted to be able to learn how to advocate in a professional way and be able to engage in conversations. And I was recently a school social work intern, and there I was able to really see the importance of making sure that our youth are empowered and making sure that our youth are able to be seen and given space to advocate for them and for them to advocate for themselves. So, your voice does matter. Youth already know what is going on in our world. They are watching the news or they're getting it on social media. And so it is important that we admit that and that other generations are willing to have these conversations with youth. And youth, it's important that you put yourself in intergenerational spaces so that your voice is able to be heard. When it comes to advocacy, we have been able to see so many impacts of how youth can have. So, for example, the one where you guys can see um, with all the white shirts, all the white little specks. That was my first protest. But then right next to it, we see where it says Mendez. Recently here in Los Angeles, we've had some students protesting to get their principal back. And this is just local. So we're able to see differences in how a local issue, you still get those youth advocates out there. But then when we have intergenerations put together, we get to make a bigger change. We are able to work together. So we also know that there are young activists and older activists. Great activists have come before us, like Malala Yousafzai of the Black Panthers, and all of them had different connections to different generations, right? Many of them attribute to having that dialogue with others and be able to get that guidance to understand. So youth are our past, present, and future. They are here. They're going to be making those changes when, you know, right now, here, being here, this is a change. You guys are learning, you guys are gathering information to take this to your communities, to your homes, wherever that may be, on Zoom. I mean, online where we're being live streamed. Like, you guys are able to make change because you guys are gathering the information. How can you take this back to your local communities? So these protests that have been happening across the world, we see them through social media, right? That's a new form of advocacy that so many young people are able to engage in. Anyone can engage through social media advocacy, right? We have our phones at our fingertips. Many of us don't even put our phones away anymore. We're recording, we're taking pictures of everything because we want our voice heard, right? We want people to be having these tough conversations, right? So in Spanish, we have this saying, callada te ves más bonita, which translates to when you're quiet, you look more beautiful. However, anytime that I have used my voice, I felt the most empowered. And that is when we're able to really make a change, not when we're quiet, because we're not. It's okay if I don't look beautiful right now if I'm talking, because what matters is that we're empowering ourselves, but also giving the opportunity to empower other youth, other individuals, because if they see us not scared to use our voice, they're going to be using their voice. So with that, furthermore, like I said, we're on social media. You know, TikTok has blown up and has been a great way for you to spread the word about encampments that go on, policies that are being spread around, so much information. But with that comes our job of making sure that we're spreading factual information. It does not matter what side we are on, that we're able to gather research from these posts per se and be able to share them, right? But when we're sharing them, we want to make sure that it's truthful information, not false information. We know that there are gaps in research, so it's also important that we speak to share a voice so that the dialogue is not dropped and we can see where are those gaps, what do we need to be able to come together as, how do we need to be able to work together to create that dialogue, because change is not going to just happen overnight. It's not going to happen with a protest. It's not just going to happen with that. It's so many process, so many components that are a part of it, right? Dialogues, meetings, conferences, polls, getting out to vote. All of it is conversations. And a part of that is being able to get that other perspective, listen to that other perspective. While it may be difficult if you don't agree, it's important and crucial to the conversation that we are able to have that talk. So making sure that we're actively listening when we're listening to the other perspective, not hearing them, actively listening to what they're saying, because they might have something that is important that can be useful and we can work together. Because if we're not looking at those aspects, then it's going to be really difficult to create change if we're not looking at all the other perspectives. And truly, this is where I'm going to leave it for now, and we'll ask for questions. But truly, you're able to take space in so many ways. Your voice does really matter. Look at the panels that we had over this weekend. So many young voices are being heard. But to get to this point, you really just have to take those opportunities, take advantage of what's here, whether it's sitting down and networking or being up on a panel. Sharing your voice is what matters, and listening and having those conversations. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. And here's our information. And if you guys would like to contact us, it's up here. But if you guys also have any questions, we will be taking them. This one's on. Yes.
So we covered a few different topics here, but just want to see if anyone has any questions for any one of us.
Does anyone have any questions? Perfect.
We have one over here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Floridalma Antonio, and I'm actually here to learn. And it seems that there is a lot of important information that I've just gathered. To start off, I work as a peer advocate with the Children's Law Center, and I was personally impacted by the foster care system, which it was like a hard way to go through. And now my job is to make sure I advocate for them, which especially I have encountered many youths that are from my country, which is I'm from Guatemala, there's Mexican, there's Honduran. So from everywhere that they come to this country, they don't even know how to speak English. And to them, that's like a barrier, and they don't even know if they're doing the things right. It's just basically they're more like in a survival mode. And my job is to make sure they understand they have rights, even though they weren't born here. So hearing from every single one of you guys, the information, it's such a eye-opening if they could listen and they could see that there's more way beyond other than their four walls that they have in their foster home, group homes, and transitional housing. Because a lot of them, they're even scared of asking for, if sometimes they are forced by their social worker. Because I have heard, I have seen, and I have communicated with social workers when we are like, say the youth wants to do, which is the independent living program, and they will be like, oh, but I already tell them they could go to transitional housing. It's easier. They will still get support, but eventually the youths are showing that they are capable of, because they're the one who are preparing their breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There's no menu. There's no one teaching them. So it has everything to be with understanding and listening to them, because we're not living with them. They are the one that goes through the struggle, and they are the one who figured out how to handle things. And I have a really sad but also encouraging story, is that one day, with my stipend that I received it from my transitional housing was not enough. I was pregnant. And my pregnancy was high risk. So there was no more resources. So one day, I had to go and take my older daughter to eat to dentist because she wanted to go to eat there. And it is so hard to tell a kid, hey, I'm still figuring out how we're surviving. So that day I took her, and I took her with $17 that I just received from my tips, working from a restaurant, standing up from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And no one, social workers, caseworker programs, IOP coordinators, everything has to go through a process. And the process is not, you're hungry, I'll make sure you're fed next day. It's like, oh, I'm still submitting. We're still requesting approval from my supervisor. Then supervisor will submit the paperwork, and it's understandable. But we need to go way beyond than just saying I'm sitting here and I'll say the reality. When sometimes that's not how it is. Reality is way worse, and they're not being heard. And it is like important for the world to know that the system, it's not gonna get better from one day to another, but we gotta start with the changes and making sure that no one else goes through struggles that we might have. And right now I can say proudly that I'm so privileged to work with them because my organization has a lot of resources, and I will be on top of the things. If they call me like today, I need diapers, I'll go through the process of my organization of requesting, but it won't be more like I will be taking them. It's like I'm coming up to pick up some items, essentials, by the office tomorrow morning and dropping it off the same day. I will make the priority because a baby shouldn't be left with no diaper to change, formula, clothing, or one simple blanket. And also for the moms, sometimes we forget about that. Foster youths are not only going through that system where they don't have support, they're actually surviving for their own life. They're just youths that they're still figuring out how is adulthood life looks like. And most of the time they go into depth that eventually it makes their life worse and they become homeless. So it is important so everyone can know, and I just wanted to share that. And my question would be, how can organizations like mine could get connected to voices like you guys that have way more experience on how to work out with the law? Because in my opinion, I only have my high school diploma, so it's not like I can go and advocate like in different places. So it's kind of like, and I'm also a mom full time, so it is a lot. And I would like to get more information of how I can make a next step to work and support others, not only in my organization but also in the community.
Yeah.
We have another question if you want to also listen to them and answer both questions together. Okay.
So I'm Renata. Thank you for your presentation. I'm from Soka University, and I'm also the Secretary and Director of Women's Rights for UNH USA Soka chapter. And as Ila was talking about social media and how youth can engage with social media to raise our voices, this question came to my mind because probably this week a lot of you have seen that the hashtag All Eyes on Rafah and the AI generated image that's been shared on Instagram. And there was like a lot of controversial regarding that because people are saying that not always AI generated content can be truthful and the right information. And I see that in our generation, a lot of people are not engaged in politics, and the only information they received are what they see on social media, and not always that information is right or truthful. So my question is, how can we ensure that our generation receive the right and the truthful information, not only what they see in social media, because sometimes it can be biased, it can be influenced by the insights of their social media, the algorithm. So how can we make sure that our generation receive the right information and that they are not alienated from what is happening around the world?
Yeah, I'll take.
And we have another question. I'm sorry, and this is gonna be the last question, and we are gonna end this session.
Test.
Greetings, esteemed panel. My name is Danny Ramos. I'm an alma mater here from 1975. I like to think of myself as a well-seasoned youth. But my humble beginnings came out of being born in foster care here in LA County with the county department. Dr. Minalta, I know we have a familiarity. And as this began with some statistics, I'd like to actually, the truth is, those are really underscored statistics. It's alarming of what the real statistics are, even more than what you shared. An elder once told me, there are two passions in life. One's a personal passion, and the other is a professional passion. And sometimes they become the one. Thank you, Dr. Ortiz. In that same way, I served as a children's social worker with DCFS in the 80s and the 90s and through the early 2000s. As a social worker in East Los Angeles, I had a caseload of 120 children, which is like 4 times the state standard. Thank you, Dr. Manalo, again, because the National Association of Social Workers kind of set that standard up statewide. And it's a struggle to see that systems that need reform take so much time. I had a baby, Ortiz, on that 120 child caseload of an emergency worker, ER first responder, who actually died, and I never got to see him. And I spoke about that at the state legislature at that time, under the guise or the umbrella of the labor organization that I also represented, as well as a social worker. And then later on in the mid 80s, I was a supervising social worker in South Central with over 1,000 abused children from the era of PCP back at that time, with only 6 workers in my unit, way beyond the yardsticks, as we called them at that time too. So the long burn advocacy, Dr. Willis, I appreciate. I've retired since then because I entered another career of organizing community as a labor organizer and advocate. But it's good to see that change has occurred from TDMs, because yes, but what I'd like to share with those that are in the room is that there's other dimensions to the work that we seek to do in policy making. And oftentimes that incurs and is impacted by politics. The biggest problem with politics is politics. You know, at that time that we spoke about the TDMs and the supervisor saying we need to detain, if you do a little research in LA Times of those times, the department and the county were being sued over the fact that children were being killed in foster care and other types of harm under the guise of protection. And so in that respect, supervisors, and having been a supervisor, were afraid to return children home under the possibility too that they might still return back to that home of harm and maybe even worse. And so detaining was really the safeguard for protection. And that often sometimes didn't come just from the supervisor. Sometimes those were higher management sort of directives from in-house management such as too. I'm just sharing the other side of what we need to look at as policy making, looking at those things, is that don't forget to take into account the other components that impact policy making, because who enforces policy? Is there a policy enforcement team? Generally not. You know, so and oftentimes politics overrides policy for the safeguard of liabilities and other things. So we need to take into consideration some of those things as well. I appreciated the story because it shows that there's still great reform that needs to take place in a particular area as we protect our community, or are given we step into the profession of saying, I'm here to help protect community. And in that last part of things, what it is that I'll share is that in the stories that are told, let us not forget that whenever we have the opportunity to cut through the bureaucracies of processes that have been developed that are created through policy in itself, that there are imminent opportunities to create resources that help meet the immediate need of the families that we are in here to help create a better community. And that it really is essential as part of the work that we do here. And so speaking as maybe a slow burn marshmallow, I appreciate very much the genuine the heart with which it is that you all shared and its context. But the constructs we must take a look at, and in politics we look at what is the backlash of the decisions that we're making around these policies. How will these policies be enforced? How are we going to meet the immediate needs of community when processes of policy sometimes take so long that families are still struggling and become homeless? As we know today, we have families who are working families who are in homeless shelters and going to work every day, but they just can't afford the way to live anymore here. And with that, I basically turn over. Today, I appreciate very much because I'm still, in that case, that infamous Danny Ramos that the county has come to know, even within my own labor organization at times in that respect. But don't give up the fight, carry the slow burn, but make sure that you're prepared for that 30 to 40 year thing that Dr. Smith spoke about, and mentor somebody to take your place. Because if you don't, every time you leave as a valued, essential ingredient to change, then the system has to start all over again. And we repeat ourselves over and over instead of learning how to mentor and pass on the wisdom and the experience to those who will carry that fire as we take a break and then maybe come back at another time. But with that, I'm honored, very honored to be blessed and to be sitting here with those of you, as they call me an elder these days. You know, I'm still learning how to do that. But in that way, I appreciate the passion that lives in this room and the experience that is being shared so we can really create change. My last point was, when are we going to create a 5, 10, 20, 30-year plan to do everything we can to minimize child reform at the most minimized level of children who are still suffering in our community? Where is that plan? I still ask. Oh.
Thank you. We are over time, so I would kindly ask you to keep your answers short. But yeah, thank you for all.
So I will respond to the first and the third comment quickly. So one, thank you for sharing your story. I think that's very important, and it kind of highlights a theme of how foster youth need to share that story. And what I'll say, and I'll say this to the foster youth, but also to the social workers who need to listen, right? So every social worker has a boss, and that boss has a boss. So as you start advocating and saying, this is what I need, and if it's caught in a bureaucratic process, go up. Keep going to the next level until the change is heard. That can be done. And then to the social workers out there, ask and listen. And that's something we covered in our class, but I'm trying to be brief. But I do want to comment quickly on the statistics. You're right. These are just reported maltreatment. A lot of maltreatment is not reported. This is just what we have that's reported. So it is definitely an underestimate of what's really occurring. And reported abuse and neglect, it's underreported. So what you saw are the statistics of what people have called in, but there's a lot of abuse that goes underreported that we don't know about. Now, if we think about how change happens, because you said, what are we doing for change? It took a lawsuit to change the Department of Children and Family Services to start addressing mental health, right? And you can look up KDA and all the good changes that have come from that. And now a new change is that they're taking money that used to only be available when you remove kids, and now doing it to prevent the removal. So that's the Family First Prevention Services Act. So it's heading in the right direction, but there's a lot of work to do.
I guess I could answer the question about social media and checking and making sure it's accurate information. I think that really just falls on us, whoever is reposting it, right? I saw the AI images that were floating around, and for a rule of thumb, I usually don't repost anything AI because it's not 100% their work. And I think making sure that we're seeing who is the information coming from is really important. So I think that's part of our job and our role, whoever is reposting, to try to see who is this reputable source, just the same way as we do when it comes to like our essays and our research in school. It's kind of the same thing when it comes to social media and ensuring that it is accurate, even if that makes us like have to look up something for like another 5 to 10 minutes before we repost it, because at the end of the day, this is like your voice, and if you attach yourself to a post, then your trail is there also. So once you like repost an AI and if it turns out that it was false, then like you kind of can't like just retrace. So it's best to take 10 minutes, 5 minutes before you repost and make sure that it's accurate information. I think that's the best thing I can say about that. Yeah.
I know we have to end. I just want to squeeze in one little thing because it's related. And I feel like as an educator, but also as a mom, I'm thinking about my 5th grader who's in school and he's learning about AI way before I'm learning about, I'm trying to keep up learning about AI, et cetera. And I'm thinking about in his school, they're doing digital literacy. So they're trying to help him as a 5th grader learn how to discern what is good information, what's factual. I, as an educator in higher education, we have to be discerning and help our students learn how to discern as well, because higher ed is something that's under fire, right? We are at risk of losing students from being interested because we're maybe not being as relevant. And so we as educators have to be on top of it and helping engage our students in learning how to think just, critically about what information they're consuming. And I think the great news is youth are leading us into how to do that. And so I just wanted to add that in. Thank you so much for the great question.
Awesome. And I think to start wrapping it up, how to answer a little bit of all of them is just be critical, right? Be critical about almost everything and everything at the same time. So how do you get organizations to bring you on? Start pushing back, asking questions. Why don't we have peer advocates? Why can't it be a paid role? Why can't that be a sustainable paid role, right? For everything else, you have to be critical about what folks are saying and not just take that's the way it's been, that's the way it's going to be answer over and over again.
Very quickly, I'll just add, you don't know what you don't know. So Dr. Willis described the slow burn. There are people out there doing all the stuff that you want to be involved in and the change that you want to be engaged in. There are people doing it. You just don't know it. So find the people that are doing the type of work that you want to be engaged in. And we need to talk. So just a quick example. Right now, I had a meeting last week with the director of the Department of Children and Family Services, Brandon Nichols. And and we're going to be talking about ILP because they're going to be making changes in ILP and how they deliver independent living program services to youth who are transitioning out of foster care. And I'm going to be meeting with his leadership team at the end of this month to talk about how to implement these changes. So the changes are happening. You just got to get to know the people that are involved in it and say, hey, I want to be a part of that, because I will be happy to include you or anyone. That there's enough change that needs to happen for all of us to get involved. You just need to find the people, expand your influence, meet the people that are doing the work and say, I'm here, I want to help, I want to be a part of this, and go out and do it.
I'll say thank you everyone for coming to the talk, and we appreciate your time online as well. If you stuck around, our contact information is there. If you have any questions, please reach out to us.
Thank you, everyone. I love IYC because everyone is so engaging. Panelists and our attendees, our online attendees. But we're gonna have a break, so everyone, you can go out, stretch. The weather is nice. We're gonna have around 40-minute break, so you can come back in this room. We're gonna have different sessions, and yeah, enjoy the break. Thank you all for the wonderful panel. 1:45.